A very good day to you. I hope you had yourself an amazing Friday. It is 1906 East African time on the 12th of July 2024. And of course, I'm here to give you a roundup of each and everything that was happening in Africa throughout the week, keeping you on the know on what theatrics were being served this week and what was happening, not just in the political landscape, but also on the economic and social front. So, I'm going to be looking at all the headline hitters for this week as we prepare for a very busy week for Africa next week with a few elections coming up, including the Rwandanese general election, which we all know who is going to win after all the abductions and the intimidations that happened to the those who are competing against him. But anyway, I'll be telling you about that in a bit. Apart from that, we are going to be looking at Sudan, where Sudan's warring parties arrived in Geneva for a UN-hosted talks on possible local ceasefire. You know, the war that has been happening in Sudan for quite some time that especially escalated a while ago when some forces, the government forces, the rebel forces tried to take over the capital. So they are in Geneva right now where they're having a UN hosted talks on possible ceasefire. So I'm going to be telling you about that. We're also going to be looking at Niger where inmates escaped from a Nigerian prison that majority of the inmates being militants. That has led to declaration of a curfew that Joby was talking about earlier in the day. So we're going to be looking at that also. We're also going to be looking at Burkina Faso where Burkina Faso has introduced severe penalties for homosexuality. Um, that this is an announcement by Captain Ibrahim Traore, who approved a revised family code that criminalizes homosexuality. That is what happened when you are a country that no longer gets controlled anymore. You can make your own rules, you can make your own laws because you don't fear anything. I don't know about getting sanctioned, you don't fear about not being given loans, and you don't fear the master seeing you in a certain way. In Mali, we're going to be looking at how Mali has lifted a 3-month suspension on political party activities. Mali had uh, implemented a suspension on political party activities. This was after a small group of people started calling for elections, especially because Mali's military junta had promised that there was going to be an election, but it did not happen. So a small group of people started going out into the streets, asking for returning to civilian rule. So Mali had to ban political activities for a while, but today Colonel Assimi Goita was able to lift that suspension. Also going to be looking at Rwanda again, this time in regards to Congo, where it has been revealed that about 4,000 Rwandan troops are in Congo operating with the M23 rebel groups. So this further proves that Rwanda has a big role in whatever crisis is happening in Congo. Somebody is financing the chaos in Congo through Rwanda because it's for a fact Kigali does finance the violence that has been happening in Congo. That is why you hear 4,000 Rwandan troops are in Congo operating with the M23 rebel groups to destabilize Congo. So somebody is having a hand in the Congolese war through Rwanda because they don't want to be seen on the forefront. So they use Rwanda for that purpose, and that is what has been happening in Rwanda, in Congo. So we're going to be looking at that. We're also going to be looking at Kenya, where the Inspector General of Police, his name is Japhet Koome, resigned. This is a day after President William Ruto fired his entire cabinet. His whole entire cabinet was um, dismissed yesterday. So today it was the Inspector General of Police, Japhet Koome, resigning amid some bodies being recovered somewhere in Nairobi. More than 10 bodies allegedly have been recovered that are suspected to have been killed during the protests. Apart from that, the IMF spokesperson spoke today. Her name is Julia Kozak. And in the press briefing, it was not today, it was on 9th, sorry. just saw the statement today where she apologized to Kenyans over the anti-government protest. She says the IMF is deeply sorry, deeply it's deeply, of course they have to use the word deeply, it's part of their job description. That is why even the UN chair, is it Guterres, all he does is get deeply saddened. I'm deeply saddened by. So the IMF said they had the IMF expressed the deepest sympathy to Kenyans who lost their lives, and went on to say that the IMF's position was that of trying to help the country. Of course, we're gonna be looking at that also. And then let us start with Rwanda, where Rwandans are going to be voting in elections on Monday. They're going to be having their presidential election this coming Monday. An election that you can take your bet to the bank. Paul Kagame is going to win. Again, Paul Kagame, the president of Rwanda, will be having his fourth term in office. He came into power as the leader of the rebels who took control of Rwanda's government and ended the genocide in 1994. That is what when I say ended the genocide, you know the other side. I'm just saying this other side. It was a genocide that he had a big role in. So he was actually the country's vice president and de facto leader from 1994 to 2000 when he became the president. So he has been the president of Rwanda since 2000. That is 24 years now, and he's gonna be having his fourth term. He's gonna be having another term on Monday. That one I can assure you. Kagame has been accused, and rightly so, of backing the M23 rebel militia fighting in the neighboring DRC. As I said at the beginning, for a fact, Kagame supports Rwanda. Looks like it supports. There has been evidence that Rwanda supports the M23 rebel militia fighting in DRC. Somebody funds the chaos in Congo through Rwanda. Rwanda is used as a smokescreen. Rwanda is used as a broker, as the middleman in financing the chaos in Congo. That is why 4,000 Rwandan troops were found in 4,000 Rwandan troops were found in Congo fighting alongside the M23. So it's for a fact that somebody does finance the violence in Congo through Rwanda. So the Rwanda is going to be having its election on Monday, an election where a lot of the competitors have been the opponents have been the competitors have been getting intimidated. I know there was one who was arrested. There was another one who, and he's I would say he's running unopposed because the two opponents he's facing are the opponents he beat in 2017, where he won with 99% of the vote. The two had to share 1% among themselves. He got 99% of the vote in 2017. So he's running against the same people he was able to beat. So 8 candidates had applied to run, but only 2 were retained in the final list that was validated by the Rwandan Electoral Commission. So it is for a fact that he's going to win again. 9 million Rwandans are registered to vote, and they're going to be voting on Monday, where the results are expected by 20th of July, which you all know what they're going to be. So Kagame reminds me of another African president. What is the name of this Cameroonian president? Paul Biya. Reminds me of Paul Biya. Paul Biya has been in power for how long? He's 91 years, by the way, the Cameroonian president. He's been in power, I don't know, for 30-something years. Has he been in power for 30-something years? I'm not sure, but I know he's been in power for... I'm not sure of the exact years, but I know he's 93. He's 91, and by the time Cameroon holds its next election, presidential election, he will be 93. However, he will contest with his ruling party ticket as he has done in the past. So he is going to be contesting again at 93 years. At 93 years, he still wants to continue ruling. Let me see how many years Biya has been in office. The president of Cameroon. Wow. He came into power in 1982. 1982 is when Biya came into power. So he's been in power for 30 something years, maybe 39, 40 off my head. 94 years of age, and he still wants to run again. And you can't be sure he's gonna win, because I was reading somewhere that he did play some chess move on his opponents, and therefore he's gonna win. So he the Cameroonian electoral system is parliamentary based, where you have to have numbers in the parliament in order for you to win an election. It's not the same as the South African one, but it's almost closer to that, because it's more of a parliamentary based electoral system. So what Biya did was, according to the Cameroonian constitution, he has the mandate, he has the power, he can be able to extend the term of parliamentarians as long as the parliament passes, the parliament agrees with him. So that is what he did. He extended the parliamentary term, meaning that the presidential election. So what happens in Cameroon is the parliamentary election first, followed by the presidential election, because as I said, the presidential elections in Cameroon are dominantly parliamentary based. So what he did was he extended the parliamentary election by a year to 2026, and the presidential election is going to be in 2025. So that means the people he beat last time, of course, he did beat them because he had the parliamentary numbers. He runs and operates on the ruling party. So he extended the parliamentary term to make sure that the presidential election is going to happen before the parliamentary election. So that means he's not going to lose the numbers, the majority, the parliamentary front that he has, because he has the numbers in parliament. So the parliament did agree, because of course he is the leader of the ruling party, which has the majority in parliament. So there was no way they were going to oppose him. So they extended the parliamentary term. That means the presidential election is going to be held before the parliamentary election, and that means opposition leaders might have to sit this election out, because they don't have the parliamentary numbers which they were counting for, which they were counting on. They you have to have parliamentary numbers in order for you to win an election in Cameroon. So now that if we are going with the same numbers that you beat us with last time, then there's no point of me running anyway. So that is the move that Biya did play against his opponents, his competitors. They are very, very angry, but there's nothing that they can do. The opposition leaders. So he might run unopposed, because, for example, his main challenger was a man called Professor Maurice Kamto. That was back then in the last election in 2018. He got about 14.23% of the total vote, and he does not have the representation required by the law in order for him to be able to run. So for a fact that he has made the parliamentary election come after the presidential election, then that will mean even his main competitor, Professor Maurice Kamto, might not be able to run, because he does not have the representation required by law. That is why the parliamentary election is supposed to, it's common sense. I mean, the parliament, if your election is parliamentary based, if your election is predominantly parliamentarian, then the parliamentary election should come before the presidential election. So, but Biya is not having any of that. He has changed it now to make sure that the presidential election comes before the parliamentary election. So even his main competitor might not be able to run against him. That is Maurice Kamto. His other competitor was another man called Cabral Libi. He got 6.28% of the vote. He was elected to parliament 2 years later. But now he can't be able to run because he does not have the representation again. So everyone that is running against Biya in Cameroon might have to sit this one out unless the there's a court ruling that is going to happen, unless a court ruling overturns the parliamentary decision, which it's probably not going to, because what Biya did was, in the constitution, he had that mandate constitutionally. It's just not democratically right. It's just dirty, playing dirty, and that is what he did. So, at 93 years of age, the last election was in 2018. He's probably going to hit 100 while still in office. So he has been the president. They say he has won the 1992 election, 1997 election, the 2004 election, the 2011 election, the 2018 election, and I think the presidential term in Cameroon is 7 years, if I'm not wrong. If I'm wrong, you can correct me on the comments. But I think the presidential term in Cameroon has to be 7 years. Yeah. So that means if he is 93 right now, and if he will be 93 when the elections are held, then he's gonna by the time the next election is held, he's going to be 100. It's 7 years, and it's renewable. So there's no there is no limit as to how many terms you can run, like we have in Kenya, where you can only run for 2 terms, you can run for a third term, and such. So in Cameroon, you can run for as many terms as you can. So at 93 years of age, when you really clinched power in the 1980s, what more do you want? You're probably not even going to finish your term. If it's about stealing money, you have stolen enough really since the 1980s. You've been there since 1982, milking the country dry. Does it not reach a point where you think that now I now have had enough, I've stolen enough, these people really need. And it's the mathematical absurdity that kids talk about, where it's not possible really for you to, you even get tired, because it's no longer about the money anymore. Because if it's about the money, you have millions and billions in local and offshore accounts, and it's money that you're not even going to get time to spend at 93 years of age. How much money can you spend in a day? What fun can you have at 93 years of age, even with your money, even with your millions? So at some point, it's not even about the money, it's about just pure greed. Pure greed. And if for a 40-year-old like Diomaye Faye of Senegal, I would understand, because they still have like a long life ahead, and they're stealing money that they can spend in the coming years. But at 93 years of age, at 100 years, by the time your term ends, at 100 years, how are you going to spend even the money that you've stolen? You're never even going to get a chance to enjoy all your looted. I mean, if I were him, as crooked as he might be, don't know, don't want to throw accusations unless I get evidence from Cameroonians. Why not retire and maybe enjoy the last 7 years of your life? 7, 8, 10 years of your life, enjoying at least the money you stole. But you still want to clench to power. You want to die as sitting president. Anyway, that is Cameroon. Those are some countries in Africa that, in as much as democracy is in quotes, democracy in the whole of Africa is in quotes. Democracy in some of these African countries is in bigger quotes. There's democracy that is in quotes and others that are in bigger quotes. An example being Cameroon, another one being Rwanda, another country being Uganda. We can't have the same faces for 30, 40 years. In as much as we are saying our democracy is in quotes, I mean, those are bigger red quotes, because I don't think some things can happen we need to we can never really develop at all when we have things. We can never talk about Africa developing when we have a leader sitting in power for 40 years. 40 years. And after that, the next thing you hear is his name was Dimore, then Dimore Jr. takes over. After looting, his father looting the country dry, now we have the son proceeding to milk the remaining part. And it happened the other day. I don't remember what country it was that the son won. A junior won as the senior handed to the junior the other day. So we might talk about all the theories about having Africa, how we can develop Africa. But with things like this, really, I doubt, with a country having the same face for 60, 40, 50 years, I doubt, somebody was born when Biya was the president. Somebody was born when Biya was taking power is almost dying right now. Is actually most Cameroonians have just seen one president in their entire lifetime. And Cameroon is not a secluded case. And I know some other African countries, it's just that their constitution, in as much as it's puppet-like, in as much as it's puppet-based, it's a bit better. Even though it's not the best, it's a bit better, because I know even in other African countries, the leaders might want to stay in power for 40, 50 years, but unfortunately they can't be able to, because we had some countries had some sensible puppets before, who, in as much as they were getting pushed to do things, they would occasionally throw in something to help their people. An example being in Tanzania, I know Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, in as much as he was one of the reasons Africa never really became what it should have been, especially in the 1960s during the Monrovian and the Addis Ababa conferences. He did do, that is why Tanzania is one of the, as Kido saying yesterday, one of the freest countries in Africa, especially to do with speech and freedom. And, in as much as he was a puppet, he would throw in a few things here and there to help the people. So I guess that is the only reason we see countries having restraint, other countries having restraint. The leaders might want to stay in power for 40, 50 years, but they really can't, because they will be going against the constitution. And with now the people realizing that the constitution gives them power, especially, for example, the Kenyan constitution, which in Article 1.1 says the power belongs to the people. And you have to give it to Kibaki, like I was saying the other day, in as much as he might have been a puppet and a big puppet, he did a few things. He did throw a few things here and there to help the people. An example being having Article 1.1 of the Kenyan constitution talking about the power belongs to the people. The power must and shall belong to the people, and the people may delegate the power to representatives. Even the wording, you could tell it was somebody who was, and that is why it's not possible for Kenyan president to stay in power for as long as Kagame has been in power. They're going to have elections in Rwanda on Monday, and Kagame is going to come back to power since 2000, 24 years, meaning he's gonna do 29. And trust me, even after 29, he's going to run another time. And when he gets old and tired, he's going to have a Kagame Jr. running. So I think the African countries that are doing a little bit better democratically, in quotes, are the ones that at least had puppets who are a little bit sensible. They tried to throw things in here and there to try and help the people. I gave an example of, I know Julius Nyerere did that quite a few times. A country like Uganda just need a presidential term limit. We say a president can only run for a certain number. It has to have a number. We can't have the same face for 40 years. Nothing can change. Somebody said it's insanity when you do the same thing over and over again and expect different results. And that is what has been happening in most of these African countries, where we have the same face, the same person doing the same thing over and over again, looting, stealing from the country dry. And you expect Cameroon to change. Cameroon is never going to change with the same president who's 94 years old and still running again for another term that will see him in office for 7 years. He's actually running unopposed. The same case in Rwanda, the same case in Uganda. In the next election, Museveni will be running against Bobi Wine. He will wipe the floor with him unless something changes. So the only few African countries that are a bit better are the ones that the previous leaders tried to. And I give an example with Mwai Kibaki, the former Kenyan president before Uhuru. He, for example, brought in the new Kenyan constitution, which is not the best constitution really, but has a lot of good things in it that have brought a lot of freedom, especially with the people, freedom of speech, given power to a lot of to the people. That is why we can go to the streets, protest, and in a few weeks' time, the president has no option but to fire his entire cabinet. Try that in Uganda, you know. You are the ones who are going to get fired at, not the cabinet. And Kibaki brought in the free primary education, which is the biggest catalyst for the nuance that is happening in Kenya, is because of the free primary education that former President Kibaki introduced in the 2000s. I was one of the beneficiaries of the free primary education. Most people of my generation went to primary school for free. For free. At one point, they didn't even require you to have the official uniform. As long as you had something that looked like a uniform, you would be attended to, you know. And it did not just make it free, he made it free and compulsory, meaning a parent would get arrested for not taking their kid to school. And that basic education, that basic arithmetic, that basic reading, that basic comprehension, it is what allowed people to be nuanced. Didn't take I'm talking about something that was introduced in 2004, 2003. So it took about 20 years for the fruits of the free primary education to start materializing in Kenya, you know, the nuance, the end of ignorance. So all it takes is, in as much as you are a puppet, and we might understand that you might not be able to make some decisions because they're gonna come and get you like they did with Magufuli and all the other presidents, you still can help your people in a way. You don't have to ransack, you don't have to loot your country to dryness in order to satisfy, in order to appease your masters. So that was Rwanda. In Sudan, Sudan's warring parties are in Geneva for a UN-hosted talks for possible. They are looking into a possible ceasefire. The perpetrators of the violence are the ones facilitating the talks for a ceasefire. The irony in it. However, one side did not even show up for the talks on the first day. The Sudanese army and the rapid support forces are the ones who are meeting at the UN headquarters, where they are going to be discussing, among other things, how they can see an end to the ceasefire. All theatrics. It's as simple as the perpetrators of the chaos making a phone call and saying, let the chaos end, it's going to end. So all these other things are theatrics, they're just PR moves. 144,000 people have been killed so far. Especially, it got worse. If I can remember well, it got worse in mid-April 2023, when there was the paramilitary, it's called the Rapid Forces, tried to take over the capital, Khartoum, and that spread, of course, to other regions such as Darfur and all the other regions. And that is how about 15,000 people have been killed so far, with about 50,000 others injured, and 11 million people have fled their homes. In one of the richest countries in Africa, Sudan is rich in oil. Maybe they're done with the oil. That is why they have depleted. They've had what they wanted, because that is why they'll be starting to see this end ceasefire talks since mid-April 2023. It's been a year plus. That is, the UN has just realized that, we need to end the war in Sudan, which we started. In Niger, inmates escaped from a prison that majorly holds militants. I know Joby reported on this today. I don't know if it was Joby or E, but I saw it was Joby. So a prison that houses Islamist militants is the one that had inmates escape, something that led to a state of emergency getting declared. But of course, those things are to be expected in Niger and Mali and Burkina Faso. I know a lot of those things are going to be happening. We saw the other day the Malian, there was an attack on a wedding in Mali where 21 people were killed. So this is going to happen quite oftenly because it's all about changing the narrative. It's all about having people lose confidence in the sitting government. That's the intention. It's all about causing chaos so that they can be able to infiltrate the Sahel countries, especially now that they have shown that they are not to be played with. So it's going to happen quite often. And a big shout out to General Mosquito who's with me. Hope you're having an amazing day. So that was Niger. And then Burkina Faso. Captain Ibrahim Traore is not joking, and he approved a revised family code that criminalizes homosexuality. Look what happens when you're no longer under control of anybody, when you are truly independent, when you don't have to receive phone calls instructing you on what law to pass and what law not to pass, what bill to sign and what bill not to sign, what reforms to implement and what reforms not to implement. So there are about 22 countries in Africa that do not allow same-sex relations, but there are only few of them have severe penalties. So some says it's illegal, but there's no punishment for it really. They just tell you it's not allowed, but you can just have it. It's just not allowed. But the African countries that have severe, there are countries. There's a difference between making it illegal and criminalizing it. And I guess the countries that have criminalized it are quite a few. There was Ghana that was about to criminalize it, but of course it never happened. That the president played games here and there, refused to sign the law, so the law never assented, even though it was passed in parliament. Uganda did go all the way and criminalized it, and now here comes Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso has introduced severe penalties such as deaths and long prison sentences. So the council approved, I'm talking about the council in Burkina Faso, it approved a decree for a new personal and family code, it's called the CPF, that enshrines the ban on homosexuality. From now on, homosexuality and related practices are prohibited and punishable by law in Burkina Faso. So the only other country that I know that has similar laws is Uganda. And of course, you know what happened with Uganda. They were threatened they were threatened with a lot of things, including that they're not going to get loans anymore. And in as much as it was made illegal in Uganda, I think the threats worked. Personally, I think the threats worked because I haven't heard anybody getting arrested, I might not have looked deep enough, but from where I sit, I might be wrong. I've not heard of a Ugandan jailed for homosexuality. So, and I wondered because it happened that the Bretton Woods and everybody was so angry at Uganda and they put in economic sanctions, talked about how we are not going to give you loans anymore. And Museveni was there saying, we don't need your loans, you can keep your loans, blah, blah, blah. But I know Uganda is receiving loans. I'm aware of that, still get loans. So I'm sure it did not just happen like that. They just did not wake up and change their mind and say, I know we had said we are not going to give you loans because you signed the anti-LGBTQ laws. We are now going to give you loans. So I think something happened. I think the law was not changed because it had already been assented, but it's not taken seriously. I've not had anybody jailed, anybody arrested. I might be wrong. I'm just speaking from where I sit. In Mali, the Malian junta and Colonel Assimi Goita did end the political activity suspension. So there was a Malian junta, Assimi Goita had suspended political party activities for 3 months. Why? Because the Malian junta had promised the people of a civilian transition. It would the military is going to be ruling for a few years, then we are going to transition to civilian rule. And when that did not happen, because the days that they had promised, they did not deliver the promise. So a group of people, a minority group of people, a small group of people was angry and thought that the military wanted to stay in power forever. So they went into the streets, started making noise, talking about we need a civilian transition. You promised that you were not going to stay in power beyond 2023. It's now 2024. You're still in power. And Assimi Goita was not having all that bullshit. He suspended all political activities there. And he instead called for the start of a national dialogue for peace in Mali that has been really going through it over the years, but it's now getting its footing. And military leaders in Mali have been in power since 2020. And they say that the reason they had not yet moved to civilian rule was that they felt that like, it wasn't, Mali was not ready yet for civilian rule, and they needed more time. For the past 2 years, the military junta under Assimi Goita has broken alliances with France, with other European partners, and it has it's militarily and politically, it looks like Mali is now leaning towards Russia, and we actually have Russian forces operating in Mali. They also kicked out the UN peacekeeping mission. They don't want anything to do with that part of the world. The only side they talk to is Russia, really. So that is why the repercussions of that is the attacks that you've been hearing here and there, the jihadists attacking here and there, with the latest one being the Mali wedding attack that killed 21 people. But it's a good start for Mali now that they have lifted the political party suspension. So now political party activities is allowed in Mali, meaning Mali is actually looking towards a civilian handover in the next few years, a civilian transition. It's not going to be a military government for good. The same case in Burkina Faso, where they agreed that Traore can still stay in power for the next few years. After that, they're going to have a civilian election, which Traore will be allowed to run. And if the people are happy with him, they can now elect him through the ballot. Anyway, that was everything that was happening in Africa this week. Not really much, apart from the upcoming elections in Rwanda on Monday, the peace talks that are happening in Sudan, in Geneva over the Sudan war, apart from Niger's prison escape, where there is a state of emergency in Niger after military prisoners escaped from a prison, apart from Burkina Faso banning homosexuality for good, and of course, apart from Mali lifting the suspension on political activities. So I hope you enjoyed the rest of your week, the rest of your day. I'll be here tomorrow, and Keith is joining me just as I'm closing. And Joby is coming up in a bit. She's actually already.
Oh, you done? You done, Demore?
Yeah, I'm just finishing.
Oh, damn! I'm sorry. I had to wash my ball sack.
I'll see you. I'll see you tomorrow on the show. Will you be at home?
Yeah, I'm home. I'm home now, actually.
Yeah, I'll maybe call you if you'll be awake.
Yeah, call me if I'm up. Shit, see what's going on.
Okay, so enjoy the rest of your day. I don't wanna eat up Joby's time. I am sure she has a very good show today. It's always a pleasure, ladies and gentlemen.
Joby's in the back. Joby's in the back, probably eating ugali.
No, she's not in the back room. She's right here.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh shit. Okay.